Well, hello there, and welcome to the first video portion that is my section of this Facebook takeover. What I would like to take this moment to do is to read a portion of, a segment of a portion from the first book in my series, The Curious Tale of Gabrielle. For those of you that are still in the running for a signed copy of the book, good luck, and I hope you do well. If, unfortunately, you do not win one of the copies being presented, there is always another choice. My book is available at Barnes & Noble in both the digital version and a printed copy, as well as on Amazon and on my website. Even if you would like a signed copy of it, because my signature is awesome, you can actually go to my website and purchase a signed copy, and I will even put a note in there. So, without further ado, I'm going to be reading an excerpt from the first book, The Curious Tale of Gabrielle. If I stutter, I do apologize. I'll do my best to, keep it rolling, but the coffee hasn't sunk in quite yet. But I'm trying. The truth was that Gabrielle had been alone no more than she had been uninterested in everything that she saw. In fact, she had been watched since the very moment she had set foot within the walls of the strange maze that masked an antique store. Two very old, sharp green eyes had not lost view of Gabrielle once she had ventured to and fro between the wonders that filled the room. Pale as porcelain, yet sharp as barb, the dim light did little to break them from the new visitor of the shop. A grin appeared beneath these two old eyes every time the young girl opened a box or peered through a case. A touch of color flooded the two pale cheeks as the grin spread wide. Her audience had just as much interest and enjoyment out of watching Gabrielle explore as she did discovering the surroundings herself. These old eyes watched more intensely as she walked into the opening and peered through the centerpieces. Slowly placing one foot in front of the other, heel to toe, Gabrielle began to drift around the center aisle and wonder at the cases before her. For unlike the other cabinets and displays that she had previously examined, these particular glass-faced wonders were filled with an assortment of oddities. Within these cabinets, Gabrielle found everything from crystal decanters filled with strangely colored liquids to small wooden figurines carved into miniature assorted animals and persons. She saw vast silver pieces from vases, stands that held strange assortments of little silver boxes, cups, and more. The items Gabrielle found while walking down the aisles in this broken-down shop were absolutely beautiful, and she found herself wishing that she could take the time to examine every single piece. The color shown by these encased artifacts through the dusty glass made them seem so full of life and wonder. Much different from the other items in the store, Gabrielle thought. This must be the heart of the shop. She looked around at her surroundings. These items seemed to want to be looked at and displayed. Unlike many other items in the shop, were hidden away behind layers of dust and grime or locked away in drawers and cabinets. It was at this moment that Gabrielle stopped in front of a small oak secretaire between the two large glass armoires. She noticed that the front drawer was slightly open, and she thought she could see a glimmer of something within the darkness in the drawer. Cautiously, she took a half step toward the secretaire and slowly pulled the drawer open. The desk was filled with old papers covered in dust and cobwebs. The writing on most of the items had faded, but even so, they had turned a dark brown, and in the dim light they could not have been read regardless. As she began to close the drawer, Gabrielle noticed a shimmer of silver amongst the dark. Tucked between several of the aged parchments, she reached towards the back of the drawer and retrieved a small silver bracelet from its depths. Stepping back, she brought the bracelet closer to her eye to examine it more thoroughly. It was a thick silver bangle, and it looked more like a cuff than a delicate bracelet. The bangle was covered in ornate carvings and designs, but the designs didn't look like modern bracelets Gabrielle saw in the stores. The designs on the bracelet were crude and yet very beautiful, like they had been made long before machines were used to cut precise designs. The bangle was covered in a layer of tarnish, and in this light, she thought the bracelet could have been easily 100 years old. Again, she noticed, and was surprised by, the warmth of the piece, for it was as though it had been just taken off by its owner, and not sitting in the back of an old, dusty drawer for who knows how long. As she observed the bracelet with all the intensity of a girl that her age could muster, she began to slip the bracelet onto her wrist, when all of a sudden she got the strangest feeling. She was not alone. Gabrielle became quite alarmed when the feeling persisted, giving the impression that she had not been alone for some time. She slowly took a slight step back, and when she heard a very soft yet direct voice coming from one of the rows behind her, she couldn't tell the exact location. "Ah, so that's where I left it. It has been some time indeed since I saw it last." Gasping and turning as quickly as she could, Gabrielle dropped her father's silver, yet she maintained a firm grasp upon the bangle. It fell directly on her backside, ruffling her red, lace-trimmed party dress in the process. The dull yet sharp tintabulations of the coin making its way across the floor acted like nails on a chalkboard to Gabrielle. Her father's silver rolled across the floor, and before finding its new home between the legs of an end table, nearly lost from sight. Her eyes followed the coin across the floor before they focused on her own feet. With a slight grimace, Gabrielle lifted her right hand and peered down at the bangle, wondering why she's still holding on to it. Quickly gaining focus, her gaze shot upward as she surveyed for the source of the voice. Off to her left, she heard the ruffling of fabric, then a soft step toward her. Suddenly, an old woman came into view from behind a display, green eyes jetting from the darkness and piercing through Gabrielle. She had white hair pulled back into a tight bun and was wearing a black dress. Her face was that of an older woman, yet her skin remained relatively without wrinkle, as though she were young and old simultaneously. Gabrielle could tell that she was once quite beautiful, and she was still, despite the signs of her age. The old woman had emerald eyes that glowed even in the low light of the store, and a thin smile that Gabrielle found slightly comforting. She took several steps towards Gabrielle, her eyes continuously locked onto the young girl's face. She was very tall. "My dear, are you quite all right? That was a tough spill that you took there. I didn't mean to frighten you, my darling," the woman said comfortingly as she reached out her thin, wrinkly hand to help Gabrielle to her feet. She smelled of fresh flowers and tea. Gabrielle even thought that she could detect a faint hint of rose and chamomile, which was her favorite type of tea. She used to drink it in the evenings with her mother and father, adding a hint of honey, but no sugar. Once upon a time. Aye, Gabrielle began, but fell short as she was hoisted to her feet by the elderly woman, lightly brushed the dust from her dress and smiled. "Gabrielle, my dear, you really must be more careful. You could have hit your head when you fell. That wouldn't have been good. In my old age, I am uncertain I would have been able to carry you to the doctor," the old woman began. "I'm terribly sorry," Gabrielle interrupted, very much out of character. "I was just looking around. I wasn't going to break anything. I was being as careful as I could," she explained. How did she know my name? Gabrielle wondered to herself. With a smirk and a faint giggle, the old woman continued, "That's quite all right, my dear. You're always welcome here, especially in a day as chilly as this. Now, are you all right? Your dress is a bit dirty. I remember when I was your age, I used to hate wearing dresses. I would wear pants whenever I could." Now that Gabrielle was standing, she noticed how tall the old woman truly was. Granted, she was not the tallest 13-year-old she knew, but this woman was easily taller than most of the adults that she had ever met, except for her father, who was just over 6 feet tall. Gabrielle looked the woman over once over again, from head to toe. She was wearing a long black dress, which, unlike anything else one might find in this place, seemed to be new. She was also wearing running shoes. That struck Gabrielle as something odd and, frankly, a little bit silly. Why would an old woman as this wear a nice dress and running shoes? "I'm fine, thank you," Gabrielle said faintly. Their gazes were locked. Gabrielle was curious to learn more about the woman that had all these curiosities and wore running shoes with a dress. However, she was raised never to talk to strangers and to be cautious of people she did not know, especially when you find yourself alone with them in an isolated place such as this. Yet she found herself more interested than scared in this situation, as was often the case when she encountered new and strange situations. Gabrielle had a tendency of getting herself into trouble more often than not with her curiosity. Often she found herself staying when she should run, such as in this case, with a strange woman standing before her. Well, I think that's enough of reading for that one for now. If you would like to read more, and I encourage you to do so, again, you can find this particular book at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and my website. And hopefully you might be one of the lucky ones that's going to win one of these. And I just want to let you know that if you already have a signed copy of my book and you happen to be one of the lucky people that's going to win my book, you actually have the option of trading that winning ticket, so to speak, for a signed copy of the second book when it releases later on this summer. All right, folks. Well, that's it for this portion of the takeover. I'm going to see you back here shortly for another excerpt from another book.